So, it's finally happened. After more than a year of back and forth, threats, and a whole lot of speculation, the big trade deal between India and the United States is officially on the books. But what does it actually mean? Well, let's get into it because this story, it has a lot of layers.
You know, with all the headlines and all the noise, there's really only one number you need to focus on right now, and that number is 18%. This is the new single tariff the U.S. is going to put on goods made in India. And trust me, this is a massive, massive shift. Let me show you what I'm talking about.
All right, so after what felt like forever, a period of serious uncertainty that had markets, completely on edge, we've got a breakthrough. The looming threat of a really damaging tariff war seems to be off the table, at least for now. But to really get why everyone is breathing a sigh of relief, you have to understand just how bad things could have been.
And here it is, plain and simple. We went from looking at a potential combined tariff of a staggering 50% on Indian goods down to a single, flat 18%. I mean, this is a huge win for Indian exporters who are basically staring at a brick wall. But where did that crazy 50% number even come from?
Well, it was actually two different tariffs, just stacked right on top of each other. You had a 25% reciprocal tariff. That's something the U.S. was kind of doing more broadly. But then, on top of that, was another 25% punitive tariff, aimed specifically at India for buying Russian crude oil. Put them together, and you get that daunting 50%. This new 18% deal, it gets rid of that punitive tariff completely and takes a big chunk out of the reciprocal one.
Okay, but here's where the story takes a really interesting turn. The second this deal was announced, two completely different versions of the story started coming out, one from Washington and one from New Delhi. Seriously, it's almost like they announced two totally separate deals. Both President Trump and Prime Minister Modi went on social media to celebrate the agreement. But when you put their posts side by side, wow, the differences are huge and they really point to two very different political messages. Let's break down exactly what each of them said. So President Trump's version was, well, massive. He painted this picture of a total win for America. He claimed that India agreed to completely stop buying Russian oil, that it would drop its own tariffs on U.S. goods all the way to zero, and that it had committed to buying over $500 billion worth of American products.
Now, listen to Prime Minister Modi's statement. It is laser-focused on just one thing, that 18% tariff cut on made-in-India products. For his audience back home, this is a clear, simple economic victory. But notice what's missing? Right. No mention of Russian oil, nothing about zero tariffs, and not a word about that $500 billion figure.
This chart just lays the disconnect bare. As you can see, the one and only thing both sides agree on is the 18% tariff. That's it. On every other major point, stopping Russian oil buys, India's tariffs going to zero, that $500 billion shopping spree, the U.S. has made a huge claim. In India, well, India has been totally silent. Okay, so let's put all that ambiguity on the shelf for just a second and focus on the one thing we know for sure. That 18% number, it's a really, really big deal, and it's already having an immediate positive impact on the Indian economy. So how does this actually give India an edge? Well, this chart puts it all into perspective. At 18%, India's exports to the U.S. now face lower tariffs than key rivals like Vietnam. And look at China. The 34% tariff they face is dramatically higher. This one move literally repositions India in the global supply chain.
And that new competitive advantage? It creates this powerful ripple effect. The deal immediately ends a ton of market uncertainty, which has boosted investor confidence and even strengthened the Indian rupee. It's like a shot in the arm for huge export sectors like textiles and auto parts. And on the world stage, after all the pressure over Russian oil, this deal kind of pulls India back from the edge of being economically isolated.
All right, time to get back to those ambiguities, because they are just too big to ignore. While that 18% is a solid win, all the other claims made by the U.S. leave us with some major unanswered questions.
First up, Russian oil. President Trump was crystal clear. He said India agreed to stop buying it. But so far, crickets from New Delhi. In fact, reports are saying that Indian refiners haven't gotten any orders to stop their purchases, and Russia says they haven't been notified of any change either. And then there's the whole zero tariffs thing. Is India really going to throw its markets wide open to all American goods? Indian officials are saying, hold on, details are still being worked out. They've been pretty clear that sensitive areas, especially agriculture, are still going to be protected. That sounds like a pretty big disagreement. So what about that wild $500 billion number? Is that a real commitment that's happening soon, or is it more of a long-term goal? Well, one think tank did the math and found that at the current rate of imports, it would take India over 20 years to hit that number. So yeah, that suggests it's not exactly an immediate plan. And this brings us to what might be the touchiest subject of all. Right after the announcement, the U.S. Agriculture Secretary was tweeting his excitement about American farm products getting into India's huge market. This seems to fly directly in the face of what Indian officials have said over and over, that they'll protect their farmers, especially from genetically modified or GM crops. So what's the bottom line here? Where does this leave us? Well, the situation is pretty clear. It's immediate relief now, but a whole lot of uncertainty down the road. We've got one solid, confirmed fact surrounded by a thick fog of conflicting stories. The main takeaway is this, that 18% tariff reduction is a clear, immediate win for India, no doubt about it. It gives them stability and a real competitive boost. But the much bigger deal that Washington described, the one with huge commitments on oil, tariffs, and purchases, that version of the story is still completely unconfirmed. The fine print, it seems, is still very much unwritten.
And this brings us to the final and maybe the most important question of all. The way this whole thing was announced, with one side claiming a massive, sweeping victory, and the other side just quietly confirming one key part, it has a lot of people asking, is this a partnership of equals? Or is it something that feels a lot more like a treaty written on dictated terms? The answer to that question is going to define this relationship for years to come.